I really wish for one moment you guys could just see how important testosterone is when it comes to your quality of life. Okay, how is it possible? This is probably what you're thinking, right? That testosterone could make or break a man's life. It could ruin your life, or it could make you live the best quality life possible. Now, the thing is with testosterone, it's not just about muscle building. It's not just about going to the gym, looking big, being like one of them steroid head guys who walks around with big muscles and all the girls like him, right? It's a lot more than that. If you think this video is going to be some shallow explanation of testosterone gets you girls, testosterone gives you big muscles, then you're really in for a treat, because I'm going to tell you about what testosterone does to the quality of your life by looking at the ins and outs of it, right? And really explaining to you guys how it changed my life and how it can ultimately change yours. So let's get into this in terms of what testosterone is, right? Why is it bad and why can it destroy your life? Well, the thing is, right, when it comes to, why is low testosterone bad? Let me just correct myself there. The thing is with low testosterone, it is a pandemic. Okay, it is a pandemic, and it's the most unrecognized pandemic in the world. Do you know why? Because testosterone levels have dropped by 50% since the 1970s. But it doesn't get talked about. This isn't mainstream headline medical news. This is something that just is brushed under the carpet. Well, go get your blood test done. I guess it means like the shallow thing that most people think it means, which is you can't put on muscle as easy and you can't get as much female attention anymore. Right, which, I mean, you could argue those within themselves are quite important, but it's a lot more than that. And the fact that it's dropped over 50% since 1970 literally makes it a pandemic. But nothing's being done about it. No one's talking about it, not to the extent that I am, not to the extent that it should be talked about. And if they do talk about it, they just say, go to a TRT clinic or go take peptides. That doesn't solve the problem. That funds the pharmaceutical companies and keeps the whole big pharma thing running, right? It's what the elites want when they're controlling society. They want men dependent on TRT, right? It's, TRT and natural testosterone are not actually the same thing. So why is this pandemic so bad? I mean, if you look at the men in the 1970s and how testosterone affects their quality of life, let's go into this, right? You look at videos of men walking around from the 1970s. What do you often see? One thing I always notice is that they always seem to have a bit of pep in their step, confidence. They look lean, athletic, healthy. They're not all big bodybuilders, right? Whereas ironically, you look in society now, there's more big bodybuilders walking around than there are people who are just lean and athletic like there was back in the day. Yet testosterone is half as much as it used to be. So it's clearly not just about muscles. This is about how it affects your confidence, how it affects your drive, your ability to wake up every day and want to achieve things, right? Want to go out and stand up for what's right. You want more for yourself. You won't tolerate bad things. This is what testosterone reflects. And when you look at how men and people have behaved in society back in like 50, 100 years ago, they were drastically different. There's a phrase that goes around when people say men used to go to war and now they do X, Y, Z, right? They'll say men used to go to war and now they cry when the girl dumps them. Men used to go to war and now they do this. And it's a good saying because it's actually kind of true. I know the go to war thing is an extreme example, but it's true in the sense that men used to do hard shit, right? And now men are struggling to do that same shit purely because of that hormone. Because that hormone has dropped. Now, whether that hormone has dropped in correlation to men changing their behavior, I don't know. What I truly think it is lifestyle has changed. Health has gotten worse. The physical biology of testosterone has changed because people are eating crap. They're not living the right lifestyle, doing the right things. And therefore it's dropped, and therefore behavior has dropped with it. That's what I think has happened. Because you look at how much food has changed in correlation with the testosterone drop. It's breathtaking, right? You look at how back in the 1970s, food was mostly less processed, right? It wasn't perfect. Not everyone was eating steak and eggs every day. I'm not saying that. But red meat consumption was a lot higher. Even though the statistics say, oh, meat consumption has increased, they're talking about chicken, turkey, bacon, processed meats. Actual red meat was a lot higher. Was the consumption of red meat was a lot higher before than it is now. Food tended to be less processed. There was less pesticides used. And if they were organic. People didn't consume as much extra ingredients in their stuff, right? Sugar was sugar, but it was cane sugar, right? Cane sugar's not that bad. What's really bad is the emulsifiers. It's the seed oils. It's when you pick up an ingredient, right? If you guys eat cereal, look at the ingredient of the cereal or look at the ingredient of a protein bar and you see all stuff like xanthan gum, emulsifiers, lecithins, potassium ironate or whatever, like half the shit you don't know what it is. That's the bad stuff, right? The sugar itself isn't really that bad. Same with saturated fats. People ate more saturated fats, more cholesterol back in the day. These are all the building blocks of testosterone. Now, some of you might not understand what actually fuels testosterone, and I will cover that a little bit in this video, but this video is mostly about how the testosterone affects your life. So when you look at the average man now, depression rates are through the roof. Couples are getting divorced now more than ever. Men's suicide rate is higher than it ever has been. A lot of men are reporting feelings of lack of motivation. More men are out of shape and have a skinny fat physique. Most men can't get laid or they can't even have a successful date, right? That is a huge change. And, people say, oh, it's the dating market's changed or standards have changed through social media. It's not. Social media just highlights what is out there. So you can't blame women for being more selective. Right? People say, oh, women want this. They just want millionaires. No. There's so many women out there that will settle for much less than that. That is some of the hardest cope I've ever heard ever, is that women only want money. They're only attracted to money, this and that. That's not true at all. Right? What they want is a man to behave like a man. And social media highlights that. The 10% of men that do have high testosterone now behave like men. And as a result, it impacts their ability to go out and date. And obviously women notice that subconsciously. That's why the 90% of men who have low testosterone struggle to date. Because women can they speak to them, they sense that they have low testosterone, they can sense the kind of loser energy coming from them. And it turns them off. And they can't help it. Right? And they're totally right to be turned off by that. Because that's not how a man should be. So this shows, right? And this can literally destroy a man's life. A man can quickly go into this, into this position, which I almost spiraled into myself years ago. And I'm glad I pulled myself out of it. I don't like the direction my life is going. I don't like my job. I can't get a girlfriend. I look like shit. I feel like shit 24/7. I have no motivation for anything. What is the point? Like, why do I exist? Why am I a man? Like, what is the point in life? That is a very bad place to be. And a lot of men simply accept that as reality and they live their whole life like that. Whereas a man's reality should be conquering life every day. You wake up and you have drive. You have goals. You don't have to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. You can have goals within your job, within helping other people in your life, within your hobbies, whatever it is. Anything that gives you that drive and sense of accomplishment. But now men don't have that. It's just you go to work, you come home, you probably smoke weed or you drink at the weekends or you play video games. You have no drive there. And that is directly stemming from low testosterone. Yeah, and if you do have ambition, but you don't have the motivation to act on your ambitions, again, probably low testosterone. You see how all of this can destroy a man's life. No respect for women, no drive, doesn't know what direction he's going in life, has no clear goals, doesn't feel good about himself, has no confidence, doesn't see himself as valuable, probably attacks people passive aggressively or physically aggressively to get that anger out. That's probably why there's so many fights on nights out. Believe it or not, if the world was surrounded by high testosterone men, then there would be less fights, there would be less violence, there would be less attacks on women, there would be less attacks on, there would be less injustice in the world because high testosterone men are more content within themselves, they can control themselves, and they stand up for what's right. It's actually the low testosterone men that are aggressive, that can't control their emotions, that can't control their urges, and they act out. This isn't about beta male, alpha male, all of that stuff. That's all that's very hard red pill. This is about what is biologically going on in your body, which is actually affecting the way you think and feel and live, right? And you cannot deny that. You know, people say, well, where's the study on it, right? I mean, there probably are studies, but just hear me out about the study thing. You know, at what point do you consider studies worthy or not? When they're taken out of context, when they don't measure every variable, right? When they tell you that, for example, let's look at the cholesterol studies. Cholesterol is bad for your health, right? They simply look at thousands of people who eat processed food and they look at one variable, which is cholesterol, and say, well, cholesterol was higher and heart disease was higher, therefore it's cholesterol. But when you actually look at the symptoms, right, and what causes plaque buildup, it's the processed food and the oxidation and the stress, and that's what causes it. But they don't look at that, right? They don't do a test on people who eat whole foods and cholesterol, because that would disprove that whole theory. So what I'm getting at here is there is enough anecdotal evidence from both people like myself, people like the people I work with, people who have transformed their testosterone levels, people who currently suffer from low testosterone, enough anecdotal evidence from millions of people to point at one thing, right, which is clearly that testosterone is the problem. Yeah, anecdotal evidence is very useful when it's at a big scale. It's very telling, believe it or not, more telling than randomized trials, because those randomized trials are highly manipulated. You know, when thousands and thousands of people across the world are all saying the same thing about how they feel and how most men are reporting bad quality of life despite following mainstream health guidelines, and most men can't lose fat, most men feel like they're not the leader of their house, they feel like their kids and their wife don't respect them, and all of this stuff, that's not a coincidence. You know, you don't need a study to prove that. Most of us know most men who suffer from those issues, right, and have bottled it up and have decided that's their reality. Yeah, and this isn't anti-women either. It's not their fault. This is highlighting a problem within men, which is causing other problems, right? So that is how low testosterone can destroy a man's life. It can kill a man. You know, I would say it now. Low testosterone can kill you, just in a very indirect way. You know, you could argue there's actual like direct health consequences, weak bones, weak immune system, that could lead to so and so. But let's be real, right? Low testosterone can indirectly kill you through having a shit quality life. You know, it can either kill you physically, suicide, that's a very extreme example, but I'm just mentioning it, or it will kill you spiritually. You give up. You decide that you're not worth all the things that you want, all the dreams that you want, having a good physique, feeling good within yourself, being the leader of your house. You're not worth all that. So you just settle for what average is. You settle for the low testosterone level. That hormone is so important. I cannot stress it enough. And there is a reason why the elites are so anti it. Why all the propaganda on TV is anti-masculine, anti-testosterone. They're teaching boys in schools to kill their competitive drive, to kill their instinct as a man, which is to compete, to conquer, to do things, right? To explore, to do all these things. They kill that, right? Through propaganda and also through food, through everything. And all the studies and everything is a congruent to this, to basically keep people stuck and keep men stuck in a loop of low testosterone. It's a harsh cycle, and you must break out of it if you care about your quality of life as a man.